Whether it be the intrusions of hackers, a major explosion at the World Trade Center, or a bombing attack by bin Laden, all of these greatly exceed the frequency bandwidth understood by the American military. Senior Colonel Kiao Liang and Colonel Wang Xiangsui, People's Liberation Army, People's Republic of China. 31 months later, the 11th of September 2001.
Terror attacks on World Trade Center, Pentagon and Pennsylvania.
Oh my God!
Was it a mere coincidence that what these two Chinese army officers wrote in a book published by People's Liberation Army actually executed by al-Qaeda 2.5 years later? Or was al-Qaeda really a pawn in the hands of China? But the truth is more dangerous and fearful than the mere 9/11 attacks. For India, terror in Kashmir is not just Pakistan-centric. Neither the terror attacks in northeast India stand-alone events of any separatist movement. As a larger game plan, China is waging silent unrestricted war against its adversaries using terror networks and its proxies. Besides USA, India is China's biggest terror target. This documentary attempts to present not only circumstances but also evidences to nail down China's unrestricted warfare. In the first part of the documentary series, let's discuss the 9/11 attacks and its connection with IC-814 hijackers vis-a-vis China and al-Qaeda. Chinese always hated U.S. hegemony. Well before 1999, Chinese were biting the bullets of U.S. subjugation. It was a latent Chinese dream to supersede U.S.'s superpower. Trigger of tension was pulled when 3 of the Chinese nationals were inadvertently killed in U.S. attack on Chinese embassy in Belgrade on the 7th of May 1999. Tensions further escalated when in April 2001 Chinese F-8 fighter plane crashed in a collision with U.S. Navy's ZP-3 reconnaissance aircraft during patrol in South China Sea.
Sure. Hey, we got a DID on them. They're going out.
Port FC's boat.
How far are we?
One's right there. 10 o'clock. You're gonna pass in front of us.
Whoa, right in front of us.
U.S. aircraft had to make an emergency landing in China. China, without being compensated, had to reluctantly release all 24 Americans on board the aircraft. 11 days later it crash-landed on Pialaz-Hainan airfield. Following the tug-of-war over the incident, U.S. on the 24th of April 2001 decided to offer biggest ever arms package to Taiwan to defend herself from against any Chinese aggression. This added fuel to fire. World has witnessed Chinese heart-burning. Meanwhile, Taliban was angry with American intrusion in Afghanistan. Taliban had influence over the terrorists in China's Xinjiang province. It was but sure any Chinese help in containing Americans in Afghanistan will positively influence Taliban in favor of China. China was looking in for an opportunity. Solid proof of link between al-Qaeda and China. Opportunity struck Chinese doors when Pakistani newspaper Al-Saif cited Taliban sources as saying that 40 F-75 U.S. missiles fired at Osama bin Laden's camps were found unexploded. The U.S. fired these missiles into Afghanistan during the attack on bin Laden's camps on August 20, 1998 in reprisal of bombings on U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania in which 224 people including 12 Americans were killed. Hearing the news, Chinese PLA made first contact with al-Qaeda. China traded off the U.S. missile technology by paying off $10 million to Osama bin Laden. And it was here at this point that perhaps attack on U.S. soil was discussed with Osama. To aid and abet al-Qaeda, Chinese must have helped al-Qaeda through its proxy intelligence agency ISI. The evidence of contact between Osama bin Laden and Chinese PLA came from none other than the al-Qaeda operative Layth bin Hani. Layth bin Hani was accused of acting as a coordinator and liaison officer for al-Qaeda cells in Frankfurt in Germany and Milan in Italy. Bin Hani was working to equip Osama bin Laden's organization with chemical weapons. Italian anti-terrorist police bugged the conversation between Layth bin Hani and Italian cell leader of al-Qaeda Sami bin Khameis at when they met in an apartment on the 9th of March 2001.
Perhaps the Americans are convinced by the bombardment of the Sheikh bin Laden's training centers for them. It was a victory. But in fact, it was a defeat because the majority of the missiles didn't even explode. With these weapons, bin Laden has boosted his financial resources. From every part of the world, businessmen who hate Americans have come to study American missile strategy. Believe me, the Sheikh bin Laden is not just sitting around, he's planning something. It's not something small. In particular, businessmen have come from China. He works a great deal with China. He's got good relations with them. You see them and you ask, but what are they doing here? In the end, you understand that they work for the Sheikh and that they came to study these. Thanks to the money that comes from these studies from outside, he created the army of Mujahideen headed by Ahmadiyya and in Chechnya. When bin Laden saw that the Afghan people who were dying of hunger passed missiles to Sheikh Masoud, he bargained with the Chinese and sold them to them for an enormous sum.
This is the strongest evidence from inside al-Qaeda of their Chinese links. However, in March 1999, a Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman described the reports of acquiring U.S. Tomahawk missiles as groundless. On the 11th of September 2001, a transport plane from Beijing landed in Kabul. A Chinese delegation had gone to Afghanistan to sign a deal with the Taliban, reportedly brokered by Osama bin Laden to provide the Afghans with missile tracking technology, state-of-the-art communications and air defense systems. In return, the Taliban would order Muslim separatists in northwest China to stop their activities. But, due to the fall of the Taliban at the hands of opposition forces and the United States, however, the goods were never delivered. Beijing was positioning itself to become America's new major enemy. Bin Laden has traveled to China numerous times to meet with officials there. Reportedly, Osama talked to Chinese about obtaining material to build weapons of mass destruction. But, besides WMD, attack on U.S. soil could have been just another probable item on the agenda during one of these visits. Solid proof of Pakistan's ISI and 9/11 U.S. attack links. Is it a mere coincidence that the then ISI Chief Lieutenant General Mahmoud Ahmad had been camping in Washington at least for a week prior to the 9/11 attacks? In fact, he was with Republican Congressman Porter Gus and Democratic Senator Bob Graham in Washington, discussing Osama bin Laden over breakfast, when the attacks of the 11th of September 2001 happened. No, it is not a coincidence that the presence of ISI chief in U.S. was by a conscious design. Now it is a well-known fact that the money won like US dollar was transferred from Pakistan to 9/11 chief conspirator and hijacker Mohammed Atta by Omar Saeed Sheikh at the behest of ISI Chief Lieutenant General Mahmoud Ahmad. Omar Saeed Sheikh repeatedly called the ISI DJ Lieutenant General Mahmoud Ahmad during the summer of year 2000, when money was transferred. The money was used by Mohammed Atta, an Egyptian, in flight school training fee, their airfare, food and other logistics of the 9/11 hijackers. terrorist Omar Saeed Sheikh, Maulana Masood Azhar and Mohammad Zargard, who were lodged in Indian jails, were released by India in lieu of the safe release of hijacked IC-814 passengers in Kandahar on the 31st of December 1999. All hijackers of flight IC-814 were of Pakistani origin. After their release, Omar Saeed Sheikh and Maulana Masood Azhar reportedly met Osama bin Laden in Afghanistan, all courtesy to ISI. Soon after this crucial meet, ISI facilitated the formation of Jaish-e-Mohammed. It was not a big wonder if IC-814 was a pre-run to 9/11 incident. On the 29th of November 1999, Mohammed Atta reached Karachi via Istanbul in a Turkish Airlines hopping flight. When they went to bin Laden's home in Kandahar, Osama bin Laden asked them to pledge loyalty and commit to fight-dying mission in U.S. After that, Mohammed Atta spent some time in Karachi. Agencies have yet to confirm if Mohammed Atta met Yusuf Azhar, brother of Maulana Masood Azhar, as he along with Abdul Rauf plotted the hijack IC-814 in Karachi itself. In all likelihood, Mohammed Atta overseen the IC-814 hijack operation and met Osama bin Laden along with the hijackers of IC-814 and all three released terrorists, which India had to release for safe release of Indian passengers. Maulana Masood Azhar founded Jaish-e-Mohammed in January 2000 in Karachi soon after his release by India. A few months after the release by India, Maulana Masood Azhar along with Maulana Yusuf Ladhanvi and Maulana J. Muhammad met Taliban chief Mullah Omar and al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden in early May 2000. They reportedly sought Taliban and al-Qaeda's continued support for jihad in Kashmir Valley. Maulana Yusuf Ladhanvi, however, was mysteriously killed soon after this meeting. Incidentally, before Azhar's release from June 1999 onwards, Osama bin Laden along with Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was plotting to attack U.S. using airplanes. After the release of Maulana Masood Azhar, Omar Saeed Sheikh and Mastaq Ahmed Zargard, Osama's dream of attacking U.S. came closer to realization. Pakistan's ISI was in loop for any logistics support. Maulana Masood Azhar's link with Osama bin Laden has long been established by agencies since as early as in 1993, when Masood Azhar on instructions of Osama bin Laden traveled to Nairobi, Kenya to help al-Ittihad al-Islamiyya, the Somali Islamic radical organization, for execution of U.S. soldiers. Perhaps Osama bin Laden owed a lot to Maulana Masood Azhar. Besides, the cause of jihad was also suffering because of his absence, as Maulana was lodged in jail in India since 1994. Yusuf Azhar, brother of Maulana Masood Azhar, wanted his early release, and so was the al-Qaeda. According to the investigator of IC-814, the Taliban regime in Afghanistan was fully supporting the hijackers of IC-814. It is very much likely that Mohammed Atta could be part of the command and control center overseeing the hijack of IC-814, as he was in Pakistan and Afghanistan in December 1999 and January 2000. Not only that modus operandi of 9/11 hijack was later found to be similar to the IC-814 hijack, the hijackers used knife to take control of the flight and passengers. In both the case they attacked passengers with knife. Burger alias Sami Ahmad Kazi attacked Rupin Kachil and sent them Singh through knife. Rupin Kachil later succumbed to injuries on board IC-814. On the same theme, on the 11th of September, 2001, 5 al-Qaeda terrorists led by Mohammed Atta armed with knives hijacked American Airlines Flight 11. They attacked at least 2 flight attendants with knives slitting their throat and forced pilots to open the cockpit door mid-air. Mohammed Atta, flying the hijacked American Airlines Flight 11, crashed into the northern facade of the World Trade Center. Similarly, other terrorists operating in group of 5 hijacked other jetliners. The third group was short of 1 man, but hijacked plane wielding knives. Solid proof of China's links with Taliban regime. On the 4th of October 2001, British Prime Minister Tony Blair released information compiled by Western intelligence agencies connecting Osama bin Laden to the Afghanistan's Taliban leadership, as well as being the leader of the al-Qaeda organization. The Taliban government gave safe haven to Osama bin Laden in the years leading up to the attack. Al-Qaeda network had a close relationship with the Taliban army and police. In October 1999, annual felicitations were conveyed by Mullah Omar via Radio Shariat on the occasion of China's National Day from 1999. A delegation led by the Ministry of State Security-run think tank, China Institute of Contemporary International Relations, visited Kabul and Kandahar in November 2000. In December 2000, a delegation led by China's ambassador to Pakistan, Liu Xulin, met with Mullah Omar, following the Taliban's plea to veto U.S.-Russian moves to tighten UN Security Council sanctions, including travel restrictions against Taliban officials. In the year 2000, China's Huawei Technologies company, also accused of helping Iraq to upgrade its military communications system, signed a deal to install 12,000 fixed-line telephones in Kandahar. Another Chinese telecom firm, ZTE, agreed to install 5,000 telephone lines in Kabul after Pakistan provided a counter-guarantee for the project. In July 2001, a Taliban delegation, led by their commercial attaché to Pakistan, spent a week in China as guests of the government. The Chinese Commerce Ministry facilitated their interaction with some Chinese industrialists and businessmen. Chinese Foreign Minister Tang Jiaxuan met with the Taliban delegation whilst visiting Pakistan, and agreed to consider the Taliban's position on UN sanctions against Afghanistan. In August 2001, Osama bin Laden called for cultivating closer Taliban-China ties to reduce U.S. influence. September 2001, a new protocol on Sino-Taliban commercial relations was inked on September 11th, the day of the World Trade Center attacks. In October 2001, a Taliban military commander, Maulvi Jalaluddin Haqqani, told a Pakistani newspaper that China had maintained contacts with the Islamic militia even after U.S. airstrikes had begun, and that Beijing was also extending support and cooperation to the Taliban, but the shape of this cooperation cannot be disclosed. China's government described the commander's statement as a fabrication. U.S. intelligence reported that China continued to supply arms, including Chinese-made SS-7 shoulder-fired missiles, to al-Qaeda terrorists after September 11th. A leading intelligence publication reported that a convoy of 3,000 PLA troops crossed into Afghanistan on the 5th of October 2001. 3 additional PLA convoys were said to follow. Beijing's troops were ethnic Muslims sent to reinforce the Taliban. The total Chinese reinforcement of the Taliban was about 15,000 troops. It is also well known that Osama bin Laden's primary focus has always been U.S. military presence in the Middle East and its pro-Israel policy. He also trained fighters for war in Chechnya against Russia and in Kashmir against India, but he has never made the same effort to train fighters for Xinjiang. This was partly because the Taliban al-Qaeda network was created and backed by China's surrogate, Pakistan. Moreover, Beijing's claims that the allies have been inspired, encouraged and supplied by al-Qaeda and the Taliban stationed in neighboring Afghanistan, flies in the face of reality that the part of Afghanistan bordering China was never in Taliban hands, but under the Northern Alliance's control, a constraining factor for any type of relationship between the IRs and terrorists across the border. It is also noteworthy that China, with Pakistan's help, tried all along to prevent the moderate Northern Alliance forces' victory over the radical Taliban. Besides, China's Muslim problem has never been as serious as India's in Kashmir or Russia's in Chechnya. Being an autocratic state, the Chinese Communist regime has often resorted to strong-arm tactics and mass executions without worrying about critical media scrutiny or public opinion fallout that democracies like India and Russia have had to contend with. As incredible as it may be to believe, 2.5 years before the actual 9/11 bombing of the World Trade Center, a Chinese military manual titled Unrestricted Warfare touted such an attack, suggesting it would be difficult for the US military to cope with. Senior Colonel Qiao Yang and Colonel Wang Xiangsui of China's People's Liberation touted in their book Unrestricted Warfare, whether it be the intrusions of hackers, a major explosion at the World Trade Center, or a bombing attack by bin Laden, all of these greatly exceed the frequency bandwidths understood by the American military. Surprisingly, both WTC and Osama bin Laden were mentioned frequently in their book. Unrestricted Warfare was originally published by Fiala Literature and Arts Publishing House in February 1999, 2.5 years before the September 11th attack on U.S. 9/11 attacks were not simply terror acts by a nationalist group as al-Qaeda. The attacks were simply not a random act perpetrated by independent agents. Instead, Chinese military planners believe that terrorism is just one of the many tools at the hands of nations and their terrorist allies to wage total war against the United States. The military planners touted US as China's main enemy, and details how a weak nation can destroy America using unorthodox attacks like the 9/11 attacks. And indeed 9/11 attacks challenged US supremacy and paved way for China to rise as superpower. Had US heeded Indian agencies' request for US cooperation in the investigation of IC-814 hijack and acted on intel on the then ISI chief being the money man for prospective attack on US soil, world would have been quite different. But for China's unrestricted terror warfare, India has to devise a strategy to protect itself from any latent aggression.